Is the New York State Association of Counties, which is a municipal government association representing the 57 counties of New York State and the 5 boroughs of New York City. It's a very dynamic organization that serves local taxpayers. Convening what was traditionally the legislative conference each year, about 1,000 county officials would convene in Albany County, talking about the governor's state budget, the impact on local taxes, what are the pressing issues of the day. Unfortunately, as we all know, COVID has prevented that from happening. So we're doing it virtually. We're bringing information out to the communities of New York State, issues such as the economy, regional jail consolidation issues, police collaboration issues, and other important issues concerning the economy. We're very pleased with the governor's budget. He went out of his way to listen to us, to try to incorporate a lot of the concerns that we had advanced to him in the fall. He really listened to us. There's issues such as collecting sales tax at Airbnb or vacation rental properties. That wasn't happening before. We were not collecting this revenue. So it's a very smart proposal by the governor to put in the budget. But he also included some other provisions that were very important to us. Things like cannabis, the regulation of adult recreational use of cannabis. This is a challenging policy. It has to be done right. The protections and the guardrails need to be put in place, and the taxation of this product needs to be done and done right so that we can avoid an underground market from continuing to dominate this field. So lots of issues to unpack with the governor's budget. We'll continue to work very closely with the governor and the state legislature to negotiate the various provisions for an on-time, we expect an on-time April 1st budget 2021. This is $160 million. It's a lot of money across the state for local governments. This will require local governments to reduce local services for our veterans, our youth, all non-mandated programs, public safety initiatives, infrastructure repair, economic development types of issues. We have to pay the state's bills first. So we're asking the legislature to reject that. We're asking them to reject the across-the-board cuts if the state of New York gets its $6 billion from the federal stimulus package from President Biden that's being discussed right now. It's important for the state to get what's called state revenue from the Biden American Rebuilding Program that President Biden and Vice President Harris are releasing right now. And if the state is able to get a minimum of $6 billion, there's no need, or there should be no need, to cut these local governments across the state 5%. It's not a good policy. We hope the legislature rejects that.
We'll be looking at additional cuts. We created our own early retirement fund for county employees. We're able to entice 51 individuals to accept that. We're looking at scaling back a number of our departments on staffing, no rehiring, reduction in capital projects as well. I know many of our towns here have withheld the recreational activities, indoor recreational activities. Unfortunately, I always look at what, other areas is, unfortunately, it's seen when you take away our non-mandated items out of our budget, it's very little left. And unfortunately, it comes down to maybe taking away senior services like Meals on Wheels, things of that nature. That's the last thing we want to do in this county, any county.
Well, certainly it's not going to help the towns and villages because they're already scraping along, doing the best they can. I think they're going to have to cut back on the roads that they do and any services that they provide. It's not good. It feels like we all exist for the good of the state, and we are somewhat victims of the state. They can do whatever they want to do, take our money. It's not what government used to be like.
One of the services that is going to be really impacted is going to be the maintenance, repairs of the roads, the salt, sand. We have already spent a lot of salt and sand. If you can see, recently we had a lot of snowstorms. That is one area you're going to see a great impact at the present time. We have, like, for example, these services to be provided by the Department of Family Services and other services. It has to be limited. It's limited twice because the coronavirus doesn't allow you to have too many people in there, but it also limits you on the amount of employees that we have there. We have to make sure we we stream what we're doing at the same time that we provide the services that we need for the people of Sullivan County.
To prepare for it, we left a lot of positions vacant, over 100 positions here at Chemung County out of a total of 1,000. So, I mean, you're talking 10% of the positions we left vacant in 2020 and vacant going into 2021. We cut capital projects, and we had elected officials had 0% pay increase. So, I mean, we put a lot of things in place to meet that 5% cut, hopefully, as well as what we anticipated would be a decrease in our sales tax revenue. So, I mean, in Chemung County, I hope that we're in a good position to offset that 5%, but I'm across the state. When you look at counties that have a bigger population, we're probably going to have some significant challenges.
Listen, counties across the state have already taken enormous steps to restrict spending and to really weather this economic storm. The state doesn't need to make permanent 5% reductions, but they'll eat into and certainly cut away at those core services. Counties are providing the services that residents expect. So you can foresee reductions in 911 dispatch, the response to domestic violence and child abuse. Maybe it's an impact on law enforcement and public safety, but none of it's necessary because the state can weather this storm. And the federal government is already directing aid to the state government. And frankly, we just don't think that the state needs to make the cuts nor balance their budget woes on the backs of local taxpayers.
At this point in time, individuals need governmental services more than ever with regards to food insecurity, housing, transportation, access to health care, the digital divide, and other issues, racial and social justice. So the cut from the state will have a devastating impact on services that we provide to the most needy in our county.
It comes down to this, do we continue to run this program? When I look at foster kids, right? And if unfortunately parents got in trouble, they had issues and we had put kids in foster care, the state would reimburse us. Well, a couple of years ago, they decided to take that money away and it costed us a couple $100,000. And now I have to make the reality choice. Do I continue to fund it at this level or do I cut it? And the problem is this, same thing with Meals on Wheels when that got cut a couple of years ago from the federal government. No one understands that. If I go to my constituents and saying, hey, the state of New York's cutting us out 5%, so we have to get rid of it. All they care about is that service that they're used to, that's a quality of life changing for them, is no longer going to be provided to them. So we got to try to figure it out. But then we got a 2% property tax cap. Can't go over the cap. Everyone's afraid to go over the cap. And we lost $19.8 million in revenue last year with sales tax. So it has to come someplace. But these programs are vital to people's life and their quality of life.
Sales tax diversion plan as proposed by the governor certainly hurts a lot of our smaller municipalities, including school districts. They are diverting a significant portion of our sales tax that otherwise would have gone to the county and our underlying municipalities to help pay for costs associated with hospitals. It is not fair. This is our sales tax. We have set percentages in which the state gets the first 4% and then the local share is the rest. Basically, the governor has altered the local share formula and it's really unfair. If he wants to fund these hospitals, he shouldn't do it on the backs of counties, towns, villages, and school districts that share our sales tax. So we certainly are worried about this, and we hope that when the final budget comes out that this is removed because it really is unfair. If the state wants to fund these hospitals, which is something that is an honorable thing to do, they should do it by paying for it themselves or increasing fees elsewhere, not taking it from counties and other municipalities.
Tax diversion, Ontario County, $250,000 and broken down. I know the town of Victor, which I am the town supervisor of, that was a $34,000 hit to us, and not deserved. I mean, it's absurd to do that. We just think it's the wrong thing to do. All along, the governor's been touting that his impact. He had an impact last January of, I think it was about $5 billion. Now it's grown to $15 billion. And we've heard of no cuts, no staff reductions, anything like that out of Albany. But yet the rest of these 62 counties have been feeling the pain and making staffing changes and other cuts within.
I am not happy that really the money is coming out of Tioga County taxpayers that we cannot use, that now is being diverted to something that the state had taken care of before. AIM funding was taken care of by the state, and now they're asking us to do a greater contribution towards that. Don't like it.
The sales tax revenue divert, or?
Yeah.
So, what happens is when you lose $19.8 million in sales tax revenue last year, we split it 60-40 in this county. So a lot of towns, cities, and villages budgeted that for that year. They were anticipating that money coming in. So that's a loss of revenue. So again, it hurts as you move forward and you're sitting there trying to get through this crisis. We're spending more money, less revenue coming in, and then you rely on the state and you're like, well, you can't tax your way out of this, right? You can't raise property taxes. You can only use so much money from reserves. Can't use up all your reserves in year one. And as I said to other county executives and county managers, that this is going to be a 5 years to get out of this, right? This is going to, like that slow recession we had in 08, 09. This is going to be worse than that, but it's going to take time. And we have to be conservative of how we go forward. And when you lose sales tax revenue, and then the state's looking to do marijuana, betting, online, all this stuff, that's great, but that's revenue that's not going to help us for 2 years. We need relief now.
I think you're looking at anytime there's a loss of revenue, it's a challenge for a community, for a county, for the counties across the state. I understand the distressed hospitals and nursing facilities. Some of them do need assistance. We do have a county-owned nursing facility here in Chemung County, but a lot of counties do not have that. So why should they have to forego some of their sales tax revenue for the distressed hospitals and nursing facilities throughout the state? So it's a tough situation. Unfortunately, having a municipal-owned nursing facility in today's atmosphere, especially with COVID, the pandemic, it's very costly to municipalities across the state, probably across the country.
First time in history, New York State is actually rating local sales tax revenue and directing it to private interests, hospitals that I know and we know have been stressed. But thanks to the CARES Act and federal aid, hospitals that received billions upon billions of federal assistance. This year is not the year that the state needs to direct any aid to distressed hospitals. They're receiving it basically through the federal government. That's a $1.5 million sales tax loss that in my county, we distribute 18-20% to towns, villages, and cities. So they're really taking money away from local property taxpayers and local resources in order to cover an expense they don't have this year. We asked them to pause that distressed hospital fund and not rate our sales tax, and we're hopeful that the state listens.
We know we're going to be paying for costs associated with COVID-19, not only this year and future years. We're certainly going to be vaccinating our public for quite some time. So we need to have the resources associated with the American Rescue Plan passed by Congress. That'll help ensure that we have a balanced budget. Our revenues have been hurt, just like everyone's revenues have been hurt. So we need to see Congress pass the American Rescue Plan to give us the resources that we need to continue to provide for our citizens, but also offset the revenue losses that we've seen so that we can restore jobs that were cut, as well as programs that had to be reduced. And that's why I've called on Congress to, in a bipartisan manner, pass the American Rescue Plan for all of the country, not just, as some people say, a blue state bailout, because it doesn't matter where you live. If it's a Democratic state, a Republican voting state, we have all faced the pain associated with COVID-19, and we need to address this on a national basis.
Counties big and small, rural and urban, we've all stepped up and led the fight against COVID-19 as the economic lockdown decimated our revenues. We now need direct aid from Washington. We are confident. I'm very confident, Jerry, that this is going to happen because of the continued support and commitment from Senator Schumer, Senator Gillibrand, and the entire New York delegation for their efforts to provide local government with the resources we need. They understand the resources we need, absolutely. And they have been listening to us when we say, please directly pay, direct those monies to the counties, not to the state of New York. We don't need the governor getting his hands on this money and then holding it back. and letting him decide what percentage and who needs it, who doesn't need it.
The federal aid is critically important to do that, and certainly Leader Schumer and certainly Nancy Pelosi on the House side, and all of our congressional representatives understand how important it is for the flexibility for state and local governments to be able to get direct aid and to be able to utilize that aid as it needs to, for some revenue replacement, targeted assistance, making sure to pay for all of the support and additional things that is necessary for the counties to provide to all of our residents. So without that critical federal aid, we would be in a world of trouble. And again, that's across the entire country. For our partners at the National Association of Counties have said the exact same thing. So we're all saying the same words, that we need federal aid and we need that federal assistance to help us to be able to defense against the pandemic, get those vaccinations in people's arms, make sure that we're getting our businesses and our counties back in order.
We're very lucky to have the Congressman Delgado is very much in touch with us. Necessary, it is super necessary. One of the things we found through the time is that sometimes the direct funding from the federal government doesn't come to small communities like ours. Like Sullivan County has 79,000 people. It will go to big communities over 500,000 people. So if this funding comes directly to us, it would really help us. It would really benefit us a lot. It will help us, for example, money going directly to the hospital. We have the Casco Regional Hospital. We only have one big hospital here. It would really help us a lot funding the different activities that Sullivan County has. And by that, I mean like the maintenance of the roads. In the summer, we triple our amount of people that are here. I say 79,000, but in the summer, we hit almost 500,000 people in here. So that increases all our resources, such as the sheriff department has to work more, the 911, the buses that we run at the county level, everything in the county increases during the summer.
It's had a huge impact. If you look at the CARES Act, that the state of New York got 30 billion. So fortunately through this, I was with Steve Aquario's leadership at NYSAC. I was president of NYSAC for county executives, also president of County Executives of America at the same time. So I was doing a lot of lobbying on the statewide level, but on a national level. And I got to say, Steve and I and Matt Chase from NACO and Mike Griffin, we were lobbying DC for a lot of this bailout that's coming our way. Well, the CARES Act only went to the state, and it only goes to the top 5 counties, meaning anyone with a population over 500,000. Erie County got it because they're roughly like 960,000. Westchester, Suffolk's like 1.3 million. And you could go on. So them top 5 counties got taken care of with millions of dollars that were used for PPE, used to respond to the coronavirus. So it really helped them 5 counties. We didn't get a dime. So when we're lobbying for money, the federal government's going, look, we gave the state 30 billion. They should be sharing it with you. Your governor's choosing not to. So it was tough. And so we've been fighting and trying to get money into counties. And I want to say, Senator Schumer, thank you. Senator Gillibrand, but Schumer's been a champion for counties. He always has been and always will be. Congressman Taco, Delgado, all the Congress members that fought in the House to get this passed. If this new bill passes, this county of Albany will get 60 million directly coming to me. The cities make out better than us, but what can you do? You can only have so many fights. I want to see the city of Albany get bailed out, but not get $79 million versus my 60. But this is a game changer. This means that I can continue to respond to this. I don't have to raise taxes, and I don't have to use up all of our reserves, to get through this crisis, and I can be there to help the people.
That is incredibly important for us here in Nassau County. We had an anomaly where the largest township in our county got more than half of our CARES Act money due for Nassau County, just due to an anomaly in the bill. So while Nassau County was due to about 237 million, we got about 103 million, and one of our townships got the lion's share. So as I say, we made it work. made sure that we budgeted intelligently. We refinanced our debt at a very, very good time with very low interest rates. So we're okay, but it just makes it that more imperative that any other stimulus that comes our way, that Nassau County that provides the essential services in a pandemic gets our fair share.
Local governments across America have been on the front line, county governments on the front line of this pandemic response. And we've been to the altar a few times with the federal government, only to be left there. We're hopeful that the Biden administration and our congressional leaders, we're grateful to Senator Schumer for his leadership, deliver on local aid. We need those local dollars to offset the massive losses in sales tax revenue and the increased costs, not only to prepare our own governments for pandemic response and responding to this pandemic, but we're the intermediary, we're the conduit between small businesses and federal assistance, between families and childcare, between individuals, young people and school districts. We're the ones that assist every day to get our economy up and running, to rebuild, to recover, to get back up on our feet. And we need that federal aid in order to do our jobs well and do the job that the federal and state government expects of us and that our taxpayers and residents deserve.
We can keep cutting and cutting, but at the end of the day, there's be nothing to cut. So we desperately need that money. All counties need that money. And it's not like we're going to go on a spending run by any means. This is just backfilling money so we can continue to invest in what counties invest in is the infrastructure, roads, bridges, things of that nature.
Our jail, my budget's roughly 80 million. My jail is literally half of that, $40 million. And that's with a low census. So it's a very expensive building to run, constant upgrades. You want to stay on the cutting edge of security. So between, jail management systems and video cameras and, it's crazy. So as the census started to go down, we looked at, maybe we could explore reaching out to other municipalities and things like that. And I won't throw the county in, but I did speak to one sheriff who's no longer the sheriff. He since has moved on. And, and I said to him, hey, if you'd like, maybe sometime we should sit down and have a coffee and talk about possibly merging our facilities. I said, we could, our jail's large enough really to hold everybody in the Capital District. But with that said, we'd remove the sheriff and maybe come up with something called like a regional detention facility, whatever the case may be, and have an authority. And we would, merge all our positions and maybe attrit COs out and maintenance out and kitchen staff out over the years to come and really show a huge savings. And, it'd be a great legacy for you. And he looked me square in the eyes and said, if I didn't have the jail, I wouldn't have anything. And I went, oh, whoa, all right. Well, I understand that, but also, you got to kind of look at the big picture. Taxes in this state are through the roof. What can we do to kind of cut the expenses down a little bit and share some services?
So basically, Genesee County has a lot of jail deficiencies. It's an old structure, as a lot of counties that were facing years ago. We are one of probably the later ones to actually consider building a jail. I know there's been a bunch out there. But ours was built originally in 1902. We did have an addition in the mid 80s to add a few more beds. The inmate supervision is outdated in our current jail. The design is very inefficient and requires a higher level of staffing than the newer pod designs that we are looking at for the new jail. We have significant capital cost looming that if we do not either build a jail, we will be forced to have to reckon with. So we are trying to avoid that. There is definitely an inadequate space for services and programs. There's, as time goes on, the sentiment from the state, and rightfully so, is to increase services that help with things such as recidivism. So we are supportive of that, and we currently cannot do the level of services that are justified and needed. We had a study done. We had a jail designed. SMRT taking the study, which told us how many individuals that was projected to be needed in 25 years. We purchased land. We had SMRT design a 184-bed 4-pod facility, and you can see the rendering on the right-hand side of one of the pods of how that would look. COVID hit, and bail reform effects started hitting us at the exact same time, just a couple of months out from us starting the bid work, and it put everything on a halt. And we've been on a halt since then. In the previous governor's budget, when there was similar wording that ended up getting unfortunately pulled out at the last minute, but the fact that there's been wording put back in that would allow for collaborations and joint jail or sharing of jail operations for contiguous counties, that has renewed the hope between our two counties. So why would a Genesee and Orleans County collaboration potentially work? You know, this isn't necessarily a venture that would work in every scenario for counties, but Genesee and Orleans have a natural history of sharing between our health departments. We have a shared youth director, tax mapping services, weights and measure. We have been increasingly looking for ways for our two counties to share. But basically, there's two counties that are very interested in making this happen. So as long as there's that, there's hope.
There are really two issues. One is the physical plant, and the other is the operational guidelines, or how do two independently elected sheriffs create a smooth operational plan for a shared service, shared jail service. So on the physical plant side, of course, you've got the New York State Commission of Corrections, which provides the minimum standards for the management of correctional facilities. So our history over the past decade makes it extremely difficult to commit limited resources to a new standalone physical plant. It seems more reasonable to create new operational guidelines to efficiently and wisely utilizing limited resource using a shared jail facility with a small holding center inside our county. Of course, we need to resolve the physical plant requirements from the Commission of Corrections. We need to know what their standard is before we spend the time creating the operation guidelines for a facility that does not exist and legally cannot be allowed to exist at this time. So we need to have an understanding of what the Commission of Corrections standard is for the minimum staffing in a redesigned jail services operation. However, we look forward to the day when we would be allowed to move forward on a new and reimagined jail services operation in our region.
We're finally getting some legs on the jail staffing and the amount of and the consolidation potentially of bordering counties, the ability to house our residents or our defendants over there in another jail. I think this is a big time cost saving measure. Certainly, I know right now in Ontario County, I'll just use us as an example, it would mean no layoffs, things like that. It just through attrition, if we were able to reduce our staffing based on the number of inmates that we currently are housing. And so through attrition, that's how we would let people go. Just would not be backfilling those positions. So this would, Jerry, big savings for all counties.
Criminal justice reforms and the bail reform specifically that reduce the number of residents that are in our correctional facility have to be modified, because right now the balance is just not there. The state Department of Correction, Council of Correction, sets the number of officers that need to staff it based on the number of beds that are in the facility. For us, that's 1,700 beds that are in our facility. And at our last count, we had approximately 300 people that are inmates for Westchester County. So there has to be some modifications in that formula. And that actually could be done by a stroke of the pen in the State Department of Correction to say we have a different formula. I don't think anyone's going to get that formula exactly right, but it can't be just the number of beds right now. We have in Westchester County, we have approximately 700 officers, correction officers, and we have 300 inmates. So the math just isn't there. So we have to do some changes there. We have to work with the state, and the state has to be able to fund the changes that are made. So whether that things are like the Raise the Age Act, where it requires the county to build a new facility in Westchester to be able to house those 16 and 17-year-olds in a far different kind of facility. and the law did provide for funding for that. But up to today, no county has received any dollars for reimbursement for certain activities in Raise the Age. We can't have that happen. So when we have the state legislature and the governor adopt new things, bail reform, whether it's bail reform, whether it's Raise the Age, any of the criminal justice packages, when it's funded, it needs to be funded, and we need to receive that money because, again, without that, the counties are at a loss in trying to deal with all of the mandates that come from the state and not the payments to make sure that our local taxpayers are not suffering.
Well, I was the county sheriff for 13 years, and I was with the sheriff's office for over 30 years. So I know the importance of the county jail, road patrol, and so forth to the sheriff. Personally, if my sheriff or the sheriff from another county wasn't agreeable to the concept, I wouldn't support it. I think that takes leverage, and I think that takes authority away from a countywide elected office. Is it a good idea? In some counties, it may work. In some counties, you may have small jails that could consolidate the services, but again, you have to look at the transportation needs of the county who no longer has a jail, picking up those inmates, making sure they're getting them to court and so forth. So I think there's a lot of questions left to be answered there. I'll be interested to see if anybody takes advantage of that. It is something that could happen here in the southern tier because we do have some counties that have a very small jail population, and adjoining counties probably could take those inmates without an issue. But again, the county sheriff, as a former sheriff, they are elected. And before I would support something like that, I'd make sure that both sheriffs were on board with it.
We're always looking for ways to share services. So we do have, it's not a jail, but the JDC for the detention center for young people, we do share with Suffolk. With that, we have some Suffolk, the young people in our JDC. So that's a good way that we can work together. Also with COVID, we are keeping some of our state ready inmates at the county jail for longer. So that, just to make sure that we're accommodating for COVID, that we're doing everything we can to keep everybody safe.
The governor had issued this executive order on June 12th, 2020. And since that time, we've been working with the process to get plans in place across the state of New York. So the stated purpose, of course, of the executive order was to create law enforcement changes in response, of course, to the police-involved deaths and concerns about racially biased law enforcement, and really to create accountability for law enforcement agencies and making sure that we are identifying problems when they exist and dealing with those problems accordingly to make sure that we don't have individuals working within our police agencies who might be dangerous, sick, or in some other way having some type of difficulty. First, we have to, as municipal entities with our police agencies and with our citizens, we have to create police reform and reinvention plans. This must allow for input and comments from the public, as I mentioned, from stakeholders that are involved in the collaborative, from, of course, taking it to public sessions to be heard. Ultimately, we have to create legislative action of some sort to adopt the plan. And then finally, by April 1st, as we're quickly approaching, we have to submit those plans to New York State.
I think there is, among the folks I speak to in different municipalities, lots of questions about the executive order and what it means. It's a very short document with very serious implications, and it creates a curious and unusual process. So there's a lot to navigate and think through. Not only is there a risk of state funding being taken away, but the budget bill that was proposed by the governor's office includes a proposal to appoint monitors at the discretion of the Attorney General to oversee police departments in communities that don't submit a plan. So in other words, if a municipality doesn't submit a plan, not only are they risking state funding, they're risking the appointment of a monitor. That's discretionary, not mandatory, but obviously a very severe consequence. Albany is a city of 100,000 people in a metro area of about 1 million. So it's a medium-sized city in a pretty big metro area, and that has all kinds of consequences for the tax base. But Albany has a history of incidents involving police actions that led to significant community outcry including very recent incidents. And so there's a real tension between the police and the community. As far as I can remember, pretty much every police chief I've spoken to is concerned about how to improve diversity in their recruitment and looking for ideas on how to do that. It's a huge challenge. There are issues about the civil service law and whether changes need to be made to state law to facilitate diverse recruitment. There's a lot to think about there. There's also a second issue about training and education. You know, a lot of people are now familiar with the idea of implicit bias training. There's ongoing scholarly research on implicit bias training and whether it's effective. There are other kinds of training like de-escalation training, you know, departments are continuing to explore what kind of training is necessary to build the police force in the way that we want to. And finally, officer wellness and well-being, which I think needs to not be overlooked. There are extremely high rates of PTSD and other mental health issues among police officers. And, you know, creating a sustainable police force means making sure that officers are taken care of in the ways that they need to be.
Our Reinvention Collaborative is staying true to our history and of the bravery and the service to the public that the NYPD stands for, but that we are aiming to maintain a stellar record of driving down crime while continuing to transform and be transparent, have accountable policing, implement an equitable process and system without regard to race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, religion, immigration, or socioeconomic status. And we use that vision as guiding principles as we move through our process. New York City is a city of 8.5 million people and a police force of over 36,000. So we recognize that the magnitude and the responsibility that it is to talk about policing within our city is immense.
On the use of force, for instance, adversarial conflicts resulting in the firearm discharge are down from 7.2 point per million before this administration to 2.9 under this administration. Those are all metrics that we are following to track the progress that we have made in our reforms, progress that we are making, but certainly we are not enough there. We think this is why we are engaging with the plan, and we are doing it both in that consistent way of looking at processes, but also looking at very concrete evidence-driven strategies that might bring about reform.
I impaneled a task force to enforce the rules, so to speak, associated with the police reform measure. They've been working very hard for a number of months right now and have come up with draft recommendations that the public is analyzing right now. Those draft recommendations are very, very intricate in design. They look at issues associated with the policing in Erie County by our sheriff's office, not other municipality police departments, but our sheriff's office. And I feel very confident that by April 1st, our legislature will have passed a set of comprehensive reforms to ensure the safety of officers and those they deal with, to address the issues of mental health instability that often we deal with, and as well as to ensure that our officers get the training that's necessary to deal with the problems that they are now facing on a daily basis that they may not have faced 20, 30 years ago. So I feel confident when all is said and done, Erie County is going to have a very comprehensive reform package that our legislature will pass, ensuring that we're taking the steps necessary to provide a 21st century policing for our community.
When we took office, we inherited some challenges. We didn't have enough supply, and we didn't have enough vaccinators to get shots in the arms, and not enough places to vaccinate people. And so, once again, I think we've made some good progress. 33 days later, we still have a long road ahead of us, but we're executing strategy on multiple fronts.
And something that we've heard loud and clear from all of you and what's built into the proposal is this notion of direct and flexible aid. All of you are at the front lines of the response, both to the health crisis, but also to the economic crisis. And so we want to make sure that you have the resources you need to address those crises.
When we talk about the effectiveness of vaccines, And I actually had somebody who I was a vaccinator last week at a pod, and he sat down and he said, "Which vaccine am I getting?" And I said, "We have Moderna today." He said, "No, no, no, I want Pfizer." And I said, "Well, why do you want Pfizer? They're very similar vaccines, and we only have Moderna. So even if you don't want it, that's the only one we have." He ended up leaving, and his logic was that Pfizer's 95% effective and Moderna's 94.5% effective, and he wants the better one, quote unquote. I tried in every way to explain why it's so important to get the vaccine, and that those numbers, I think people don't understand what they mean. And I think this is such an important thing that we go over, because Johnson & Johnson, one dose logistically is so helpful, so important. And I could tell you the second dosing is logistically very difficult. We're getting it done, but think about if we didn't have to do second doses, we literally would have double the number of people vaccinated in a very short amount of time. I genuinely believe we need to just remind people that not to focus necessarily on the numbers that you hear of how effective the vaccine is, but what does that mean to the average person? To the average person, it means if they're fully vaccinated, it's very, very unlikely that they would die. And that's what we all want. I think we could all live with a couple of sniffles in the worst case scenario, but we don't want to die and we don't want to spread disease to our loved ones. We don't yet know how much disease can be transmitted in people who are fully vaccinated.
The supply and demand issues are still applicable here in Allegheny County, even though we're rural. Typically, when our registration links go up, our appointments are filled in under 10 seconds. People are monitoring those registration links like hawks. We opened up a slot on a Friday afternoon to just add some people that were not showing up in the system, and we already had 15 appointments in under 5 seconds when we opened that link. We've had fairly large 65+ population, as I stated before. We've decided to keep a waiting list for those individuals only because of that lack of access to the internet and computer capabilities. As of right now, our 64 and under are basically vying for our registration link that is posted on our webpage. Because our county is small and rural, we have developed an email group where we send out information about the registration link when it will be published. So that registration email includes our school districts, our businesses, and we've identified in those priority groups that would be beneficial for them in getting the COVID-19 vaccine.
A number of our staff that are hired to do other projects or other tasks within the local health departments have been asked to forego those tasks so that they could assist in the COVID-19 response. This is a pandemic that we need to meet at all costs, and therefore we have to put on hold most of those programs that we originally would have for the community. For instance, environmental health. Although we are doing inspections in the restaurants, we're probably doing just the minimum just so that we can maintain safety in our community. For inspections of septic tanks and things of that nature, we had to put a number of those things on hold. So most of our programs have been placed on hold as those workers have been used or must be used in the COVID-19 response. Therefore, our community overall has started to see a decrease in the amount of services that would normally come out of the local health departments due to our major impact of COVID-19 response.
Everyone by this time knows that the counties are really on the front lines in dealing with the pandemic. We're the ones with the health departments, the Office of Emergency Management, public safety, the morgue, social services, and we continue to just work on all cylinders to do everything we can to help our residents. Vaccine is topic number one right now. And again, we all know that the supply chain starts with the federal government, comes down to the state, and then down to the local level. So we're at the bottom of the supply chain. But we really see the need. So many of our residents are eligible and are ready to roll up their sleeves and get the vaccine. We just don't have the proper supply at the moment. I am optimistic that supply will continue to open up and that everyone who's eligible and wants a vaccine can get a vaccine. I'm looking very much forward to that because As we're dealing with the health crisis, we've got an economic crisis as well. Our downtowns are suffering, our restaurants are suffering. I've advocated as strongly as I can to keep our restaurants and gyms open longer, and I'm glad we've got that extra hour. Making sure that those who are making policy know that we can trust our businesses, we can trust our schools, and the quicker we get back to normal, the better it will be for all of us. I believe very strongly that kids should be in schools as much as possible for their development, and I want to do everything I can to advocate for kids getting back to normal, for businesses getting back to normal, and for life getting back to normal, which is why the vaccine is so important. That's our passport back to the land of normal.
In terms of revenue, has been impacted dramatically. I have to say that's one of the biggest hits we have taken. You take the local restaurant that was always packed, and we're very well known for that. Restaurants, ski places, golf places, people come to play golf. Like I said, the casino was bringing a lot of money into us, and we have the only casino in this area, which is about 2.5 to 3 hours away from the city. That casino had to basically cut down to 25% of what they have, separate everything else. So it did cost us millions of dollars in revenues that was coming in. Also, the room taxes that comes into the county was also cut down because we can't operate that thing. We have a big water park, tremendously brand new water park. It's only 2 years old. It's only 25% of the people that we are allowed. That took a big hit. It took a big hit on us and the amount of money coming in.
Everyone has been hurt from this pandemic and economic crisis. We used CARES money last year to offset many of our operating expenses, which allowed us to reduce costs in the operating budget, and we're using that access to offset decreases in sales tax that we're having in 2021.
I'd like to start with a quick overview of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, often called the CLCPA, or simply New York's Climate Act. The CLCPA, which was signed into law in 2019, builds on almost a decade of climate leadership by Governor Cuomo. The Climate Act's targets are based on the latest climate science and are among the most rigorous of any major economy in the world, aiming for at least 85% reduction in greenhouse gas by 2050 and setting an ambitious path to carbon neutrality. The Forward-Thinking Climate Act also commits to environmental justice, to lifting up the disadvantaged communities, and to a just transition from a fossil fuel to a clean, renewable economy. The holistic economy-wide approach espoused by the Act will transform New York's economy, create new jobs, stimulate industry and innovation, and build more resilient communities to benefit and protect all New Yorkers. Can I have the next slide, please? So, as I said, the aggressive goals set by the Climate Act, which are some of the most aggressive in the world, were set in recognition of the real and immediate threat of climate change and the importance of transitioning to a green economy. So in addition to overall greenhouse gas reduction goals, the Act requires 100% zero carbon electricity by 2040, and it also sets ambitious goals for offshore wind, distributed solar, and energy storage.
I'm guessing most of you are interested in knowing what is Build Ready. Well, it was first announced in April of last year as part of the Accelerated Renewable Energy Growth and Community Benefit Act, along with a couple other things, but it's a unique program, and we're really excited about it. What's different about this program compared to what NYSERDA normally would be doing is it puts us in the shoes of a renewable energy developer for the first time. If you're familiar with NYSERDA at all, we're typically focused on providing financial incentives and technical assistance for the private sector to implement clean energy projects. And now we're actually going to be behind the wheel and sort of driving some of these renewable energy projects ourselves for the first time.
A little background first on NYPA. We're the New York Power Authority. We've got a long history going back to 1931 when FDR signed the legislation that established us. We are the country's largest public utility, and we strive to be out in front of the development for clean and sustainable energy. We consider it part of our our mission and our mandate to help achieve some of the goals that have come out of the governor's office, particularly the sustainability and clean energy sustainability plan. Of 70% of power produced by 2030 will come from renewable energy resources.
We've been really on the forefront here. I want to be the greenest county in New York State. We've put a lot of initiatives in, like all of our fleets got to be electric by a certain time frame. We put solar panels. We have solar panels going out. We put charging stations in on all of our properties, at our Times Union Center, our parking garage. We continue LED lighting throughout the whole buildings. We're Energy Star efficient in a couple of our buildings already a couple of years ago in the beginning. But for us to kill our carbon footprint, we need to lead by example. So I can't expect small businesses or any business in general to say to them, hey, look, you have to go green, but we don't. You have to be held to this standard, but we don't. So my philosophy has always been this: lead by example, lead out front, and then show them that you're willing to do the same thing that I'm asking these companies. We want companies to grow here. We want new companies to come to our county here in Albany County, and we want them to expand their businesses that are existing here, but we want them to leave it a better footprint for their kids and their grandchildren, the children after their children, to come here. And it's about the quality of life. It's about the trains with the bomb trains. We have to look at that footprint. We've been lobbying, and we were successful with NYSAC to get the wind power here at the Port of Albany and Port of Queens that are going to be manufactured here. That's going to create a ton of jobs, but it's talking about green energy that's going to make a difference, not just here in Albany County, but throughout the state of New York. So these are strong initiatives that we need to stand on now so we can stop that carbon footprint.
Well, right now we are embarking very shortly in breaking ground in the largest investment in the largest infrastructure project in our history here in Nassau County. It's a $600 million sewage diversion project. We're working with the state, with the DEC, and it is a way to clean up our shorelines. So it has to do with diverting sewage way out into the ocean, cleaning up the nitrogen out of our marshlands, out of our ecosystem, bringing back shellfish, bringing back marine life, and also restoring those marshlands that have been eaten away by nitrogen, which makes us less storm resilient. So this is a very exciting opportunity, and we are ready to go. We're hoping to get some federal stimulus money for that to help us. If we don't, we're still moving forward. We are ready to go. We also signed on to the New York State Climate Smart Communities, where we make commitments about looking at ways that we can be more efficient in our operation, whether it's in all of our county buildings, solar panels, electric vehicle charging stations, looking at our fleet to see how we can reduce our carbon footprint. So we live on an island here on Long Island, and we're committed to doing everything we can to protecting the water, the air, and the soil, because we want to make sure this place is here for generations to come.
I think that contamination, one of the greatest threats to our water quality, the purity of our water, drinking water, groundwater, and surface water, very important for human survival here, is a contaminant called PFAS, P-F-A-S, and in particular, two compounds or chemicals in that PFAS family called PFOS and PFOA. Right now, the state of New York, through its Department of Environmental Conservation, is doing water sampling of all our public water systems all across the state. These reports are coming in right now. What I fear is that these reports are going to, in fact, exceed the maximum contaminant level recently established by our state. That's going to mean we're going to need to remediate these programs, these water systems. The chemicals need to be pulled out of the water supply, the groundwater, the surface water, whatnot. And it's a very important issue. And I think we really need to hold those accountable for putting these chemicals into our environment responsible. So a lot of work's going to go into this in 2021, addressing water contamination. I think this is the greatest challenge in our generation to our drinking water system and supplies, public water, again, surface water, groundwater. We've even banned it in the air in New York State. New York State, one of a handful of states to aggressively regulate this contaminant. Give a lot of credit to the governor, to the state health department for setting these maximum contaminant levels of 10 parts per trillion. That's a few drops in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. This contaminant is potentially very dangerous. And that's why the state of New York set up these maximum contaminant levels. Very smart move by the state. but it's going to be costly, and we have to get ahead of this and make sure that New York has the highest quality of drinking water that we're known to have. All eyes are now turning their attention to an infrastructure package of spending. Broadband hopefully can be included in this next federal legislation dealing with infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, our aviation system, both general aviation and commercial service, what's called Part 139 airports, but also our mass transit facilities. This is what keeps America moving. And hopefully we can get that done and include broadband as part of that infrastructure package. But the president has also advanced a $1.9 trillion Rebuild America program, America First. This is a program very important that will include many different programs extending the unemployment insurance, the pandemic unemployment insurance, the payroll protection programs that are in desperate need of continuing. But it also includes state and local revenue losses. A $350 billion allocation has been put into that. A very important program for the state of New York, expected to receive quite a bit of federal assistance here that will go directly into county governments, into cities, towns, and villages. Again, very important for that local government to flow directly to the local community-based level. And having Senator Schumer in a position of leadership, that's the change here. We didn't have a New Yorker in the position of influence and leadership. Leader McConnell was from the state of Kentucky, and the Kentucky needs were simply different than the New York needs or the Northeastern needs or the needs of some other states like California. So having Senator Schumer in this position, right person at the right time for the right purpose. Very encouraging to have Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer involved with these negotiations with the president and Speaker Pelosi.
We need an infrastructure bill. Erie County is a good example. We have 1,200 centerline miles of roads. That's more centerline miles of roads than Rhode Island, Delaware, and Hawaii each have in total. So it's important that we get federal aid to address the infrastructure issues we have, whether it's roads, bridges, trains, metro systems, so to speak, because one of the things we know living in the Northeast is we don't have the summers and winters like they do down south. So our road infrastructure breaks down a lot quicker than theirs. So we need additional infrastructure to address the always growing need associated with our roads in our community. We can do a few hundred miles of roads per year, but we always need to do more. We always have bridges that need to be replaced. So any infrastructure bill that comes down from Washington will be much needed, not just in Erie County, but across all of New York State. We know we have an aging infrastructure and we can only pay for so much per year on our own. And the federal assistance we could receive from a new bill that's passed in Washington, D.C. will make a tremendous difference in not only fixing our infrastructure, but putting people to work on construction jobs. And that's what this is about, putting people to work on good paying construction jobs, repairing the infrastructure that needs to be done. It's a win-win for all.
County governments are the backstop government here. We're administering all of the state programs and services. For every state agency, there's a county government counterpart administering those state programs. The state sets the policy and acts the rules and the regulations, and the counties are the local governments that administer that. What's important for folks to know here is all health, all public health and human services. These are the programs in emergency management. These are the programs that the county governments are responsible for. Both our sheriffs, our public health directors and commissioners, our emergency managers, our county executives and county managers. These are the on-site incident commanders. These are the folks who got us through this pandemic. These are the folks who each and every day are out there running public safety programs, municipal drinking water programs, wastewater treatment programs, providing all of the quality of life programs that we need in the community-based level that the state of New York cannot do itself. So a very important unit of government, public health, public safety, economic development, mental health services, addressing substance abuse problems such as the grave opioid epidemic which hit New York State and the United States. The county governments are the entities that are responsible to provide health and human services programs for those in need.